Okay, let's take a look today at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically, what it looks like after the huge event that was Avengers Endgame, which was what, back in 2019? Feels like ages ago now. But Endgame, wow, that was really something. It was the big finale for the Infinity Saga, like over a decade of movies all leading up to that. All the heroes together, this massive universe-saving battle, and really was one of those rare cultural things, bigger than just the movies. But then, well, the credits rolled, the saga ended, and the MCU felt fundamentally different. We lost two of the absolute anchors, Iron Man and Captain America, at least in the usual forms. So the question is, what's been happening since then? And maybe why does it feel a bit off
Yeah.
or just changed? I mean, one thing is just the sheer amount of stuff. Disney Plus arrived, and boom, suddenly we had what, 10 movies and 10 miniseries in just about
Oh,
3 years? That's a lot. It's a huge volume increase. But maybe the bigger question is about how this new phase compares to how Marvel built things up initially, how they developed those key heroes, the ones who held it all together. Let's think back to Tony Stark, Iron Man. When we first met him, he was, well, pretty self-involved, right? The billionaire playboy type. But then he gets kidnapped by the Ten Rings. And that
yeah.
was the catalyst, the big turning point. It really forced him to look at himself, the consequences of his life, and it set him on this whole other path. We watched him struggle with that ego, didn't we? Slowly learning to think about more than just himself. Remember in New York, the first Avengers? Flying that nuke through the portal. I mean, that wasn't the Tony from the very beginning. That was a real sacrifice. He grew into this really complex character, a mentor even.
Mm.
Flawed, yeah, definitely flawed, but heroic in the end. And his whole story just wraps up so powerfully in Endgame, that final,
Yeah.
sacrifice. Then you got Steve Rogers. Captain America, he started out almost the opposite, didn't he? Just fundamentally good, wanting to do the right thing, serve his country. Even before he got the super soldier serum, that desire to sacrifice was already there. Think about him trying to take down that plane in the first movie. He became the moral compass, didn't he?
Yeah.
The leader. The one who, well, inspired everyone else. And his ending in Endgame, while totally different from Tony's, it also felt like a kind of conclusion, passing the torch. So, okay. These massive figures, their stories reach these epic conclusions. Who fills that space? Who steps up? Let's look at Falcon, Sam Wilson. We knew him, of course. Cap's ally, always there. But his own backstory. It was there, but maybe not explored quite as deeply in those early films. We knew he was a vet, dealing with the loss of his wingman, Riley, that trauma. And when Steve gives him the shield at the end of Endgame, it's a huge visual moment. But the question lingered, like, had Sam's own journey prepared him for that specifically? Which brings us to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series. And yes, the show did explore Sam's personal life, his family stuff, but the main conflict, the core struggle, it kept circling back to Steve Rogers' legacy. It's actually quite striking how much the show focused on Steve. All those lines like, Steve represented the best in all of us, or there has never been another Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
It really hammered home how iconic Steve was. And Sam's struggle felt less about him becoming Captain America, and more about whether he was worthy of carrying Steve's shield. Does that make sense? It wasn't quite about his own self-actualization into the role, so when he finally does take it up, I don't know, it felt a little sudden maybe. We didn't really get that big internal shift moment for him, not like Tony in the cave or Steve jumping on the grenade, those defining moments. It felt more like the story decided he should be Captain America, rather than showing us convincingly why he, Sam Wilson, arrived at that choice for himself. So, yeah. In his own show, weirdly, Falcon sometimes felt like a supporting character to Steve's memory. And this maybe points to a wider thing happening since Endgame, just the sheer number of new characters popping up. We got Shang-Chi, the Eternals, the Marvels, loads of others. And look, each project might be good on its own terms, but you start to wonder, has the focus shifted? Is it more about quantity now, introducing lots of heroes, rather than that deep, slow burn character work? Think about how it was before Endgame. They spent years developing those original 6 Avengers, really digging into who they were, how they bounced off each other, their conflicts. Having fewer projects over more years, it just allowed for that deeper connection, right? For us and for the characters. Now, with so many new people arriving so fast, that sense of a tight central group feels, well, less obvious. We don't really have that clear Iron Man type leader figure yet, or that Captain America figure who unites everyone in the same way. Now, that's not saying the new characters aren't good. Take Shang-Chi. His origin story is fascinating. Seems like a normal guy. Turns out his dad is this legendary, kind of terrifying figure. His journey of running away, then having to confront his father, protect that village. That moment where he confronts his dad asking, "You trained your son to be a killer. Is this what you wanted?" That had real weight within his movie. But here's the thing to think about. His movie came out in 2021. It was well liked. But since then, How much has his story really connected with the rest of the MCU? Have we seen him pop up much? Have other shows or movies referenced his journey significantly? Not really, right? And that interconnectedness, characters weaving in and out of each other's stories, that was such a huge part of what made the MCU feel special in those earlier phases. Maybe that slower release schedule just gave those connections more room to breathe, to develop naturally, because those interactions between characters, they were absolutely vital. Just think about Iron Man and Captain America again. Their relationship was complex, definitely not always friendly. In fact, their different ways of seeing the world caused huge problems. But that tension, that friction, Tony's sort of cynical tech bro approach versus Steve's old-fashioned idealism, the arguments they had. No, trust lawyer. Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off. What are you? Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Yeah.
That stuff was gold. It made them feel real. Remember Steve calling Tony out? Saying he wasn't the guy to make the sacrifice play, to lay down on a wire and let the other guy crawl over you? And Tony's classic comeback, I think I would just cut the wire. Brilliant character stuff. And it all built up, didn't it, to Civil War. That was brutal, physically and emotionally. But because we'd seen their whole journey, their clashes, their moments of respect, it all had so much weight. And that payoff, those later moments, like Peter Parker's goodbye to Tony, heartbreaking because we were invested in those relationships. Post-Endgame, it feels a bit more like characters are on their own tracks. Those deep, tangled, sometimes messy relationships seem less central, maybe. And it's not just about the heroes either. You need a strong, overarching villain to tie a shared universe together. Think about Thanos. He wasn't just some random bad guy. Marvel spent years building him up carefully. We saw him first way back in the first Avengers post-credit scene. Then they slowly introduced the Infinity Stones, other hints, other connections. It all led purposefully towards Infinity War and Endgame. Now, we have Kang. And he's been introduced, yes, but does his presence feel as established, as connected across the board? We haven't really seen those deep links forming between him and all the different heroes yet. It kind of leaves you wondering, right? What's the big threat now that's supposed to pull everyone together? What's the common enemy? The shared goal. Because without that clear villain, that unifying force, and without those really deep, resonant character moments driving things, you might start to ask, well, what's the overall point right now? Where is it all heading? So yeah, just something to think about as you watch the new Marvel stuff. Reflect on how this shift, the sheer amount of content, the challenge of finding new anchors, the way character stories connect or maybe don't connect as much, and the search for that next big threat. How has all that changed how you feel about or engage with the MCU since Endgame? It's definitely a different landscape. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.